How can you tell if someone is a beginner rider? Not a hard question. It's the small things that give it away. Even if you've logged a bunch of miles, but still can't corner smoothly, maintain throttle control, shift properly, hold your lane, then you're still pretty much a beginner. That's what this list is about. Most riders never talk about it, but if any of this sounds familiar, this video might just save your ride or your life. Let's see how many of these you've seen riders do. Number 1, you rely on visual cues for basic controls like neutral. You're at a red light, staring at your dashboard like you're trying to read a fortune cookie, waiting for that little green light to tell you you've found neutral. Meanwhile, experienced riders already shifted, glanced at their mirrors, and planned their next 3 moves. The problem isn't just that you look awkward fumbling around. Your eyes are off the road during critical moments, and MSF studies show this increases crash odds by 20 to 30%. You're hunting for a light instead of watching for the car about to run the red or the pedestrian stepping off the curb. Experienced riders feel the half click between first and second, hear the RPM drop, sense the lever's resistance. You're relying on a dashboard to tell you what your hands and ears should already know. Find an empty parking lot on a Sunday morning when nobody's around to judge you. Roll to a stop 50 times and find neutral by feel alone. Clutch in, light toe tap upward from first. Fight the urge to look down like your life depends on it. You'll mess up. A lot. That's the point. After a few sessions, you'll start hearing how the engine sounds different in neutral, smoother, less aggressive. Eventually, you'll realize you haven't looked at that green light in weeks because your body just knows where neutral lives. That's when you've actually learned something instead of just memorizing dashboard positions like you're studying for a test you'll never use in real life. Second, you confuse straight-line speed with overall skill. Triple digits on the interstate, passing everyone like they're standing still, feeling like Valentino Rossi. Then a curve shows up and suddenly you're braking early, tensing up, maybe even slowing down to grandma's speed because you have no idea what you're doing once the road stops being straight. This is the motorcycle equivalent of being great at running but falling over when you try to walk. Straight-line speed hides terrible technique until a decreasing radius turn or patch of gravel exposes you for what you are. 40% of single-vehicle crashes are because of this. It also creates hilarious moments on group rides where you blast past everyone on the straights. Then hold up the entire pack in the twisties while they're stuck behind you wondering how someone on a leader bike is slower than them on a 600. Novices fixate on power because it's easy and feels impressive. But body positioning, throttle control, and line selection are what separate riders who can actually ride from people who just know how to twist a throttle. Dial back to 70% of your comfort speed on roads you know. Focus on smooth in, fast out. Mark your braking points with landmarks. Lean with your hips, not your shoulders. Roll on the throttle mid-turn without chopping it like you're afraid of your own bike. Find a twisty road and lap it 10 times. Time yourself, but focus on being smooth, not fast. Film it with a GoPro so you can watch yourself looking stiff as a board and maybe do something about it. Next, you ignore or abuse the rear brake. You either completely forget it exists, like it's a vestigial organ you don't need anymore, or you panic stomp it like you're trying to put out a fire with your boot. Both are wrong. Neglecting the rear means you're missing 30 to 40% of your braking potential, which is a problem when you need to stop, and physics doesn't care about your minimalist approach. Stomping it locks the wheel, turns your bike into a drifting shopping cart, and adds up to 50 feet to your stopping distance at highway speeds. That's the length of a semi-truck you just gifted to whatever's in front of you. Some courses teach you the basics in a parking lot, but they don't teach you how the rear brake settles the chassis in corners or stabilizes low-speed maneuvers because you're too busy trying not to drop the bike during your test. Find an empty lot when it's not being used for a farmer's market. Practice braking from 20 miles per hour using only the front, then only the rear. Notice how the bike pitches forward aggressively with just the front, and how the rear alone feels weak and takes forever. Now blend them, 70% front and 30% rear, aiming for stops smooth enough that a passenger wouldn't spill their coffee. Work this into figure eights using light rear drag to keep the bike stable in tight turns. Measure your stopping distances with cones and watch them shrink as you stop riding your brakes like a binary switch. Number 4, you guess tire pressure instead of measuring it. You walk up to your bike, give the tires a little kick like you're checking a watermelon at the grocery store, and decide they're probably fine. Or you remember checking them 3 weeks ago and assume nothing's changed, Ignoring that temperature swings drop PSI by 1 to 2 pounds for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The sidewall max isn't your target, it's the ceiling where bad things start happening. Underinflation causes overheating, sidewall flex, and the kind of blowout that turns your ride into an unplanned gymnastics routine. Overinflation shrinks your contact patch and kills traction, especially in cold or wet conditions where you're already working with less grip than usual. Improper tire pressure links to 11% of motorcycle tire failures, which is a polite way of saying a lot of people end up in ditches because they couldn't be bothered with something that takes 2 minutes. Experienced riders treat tires like the foundation of everything because mushy handling or twitchy steering is a direct result of wrong pressure. Beginners just think their bike ride's weird and blame the suspension or the road. Buy a digital gauge for $15. Check your cold PSI every week before you ride. Your manual tells you the spec, usually something like 36 front and 42 rear for sport bikes. Ride at spec, then try adding 2 PSI and feel how the bike gets sharper in corners but harsher over bumps. Drop 2 PSI and notice the cushy ride that comes with vague steering. Fifth, your downshifts are inconsistent or jolting. Sometimes you nail it by pure luck and the bike shifts smoothly like butter. Other times it lurches forward like it got rear-ended by an invisible car or makes a grinding noise that makes everyone within earshot wince and wonder what you're doing to that transmission. You're not deliberately blipping the throttle to match revs between engine and wheel speed. You're just hoping it works out and getting surprised every time it doesn't go your way. Poor shifts upset your balance mid-corner, which is a great way to find out what a low side feels like when the rear wheel chatters and breaks traction. And they accelerate transmission wear that costs $500 or more to fix down the road. In emergencies, choppy downshifts delay your acceleration out of hazards because the bike is too busy jerking around to deliver power smoothly when you actually need it most. Advanced riders treat shifting like an art form, using engine braking predictably and making every gear change feel invisible to anyone riding with them. You shift like you're operating heavy machinery with a bad clutch and no instruction manual. On a straight road, practice downshifting from 4th to 1st at 30 miles per hour, blipping the throttle every single time to match RPM properly. For second gear, that's around 3,000 RPM as your reference point. Wear earplugs so you can actually hear the engine instead of wind noise drowning everything out. Combine this with braking by slowing from 50 miles per hour and downshifting through every gear without a single jolt. The goal is making your shifts so smooth that a passenger wouldn't know you changed gears unless they were staring at the Tosh or counting every shift in their head. Coming in at number 6, you use WD-40. You see a squeaky chain and grab the first spray can you find, which is usually WD-40 because it's sitting right there in your garage next to the duct tape and your collection of tools you don't know how to use. Or you neglect the chain entirely until it's stretched, rusted, and making noises that sound like a dying animal begging for mercy. You don't differentiate between cleaners and lubes, and you certainly don't brush off the debris before spraying whatever you grabbed. WD-40 dissolves O-ring seals, leading to internal drying and accelerated wear that destroys chains prematurely. Chains last 20,000 miles or more when maintained properly, but only half that when you treat them like an afterthought. Poor maintenance also saps efficiency and increases fuel use by 5 to 10%, which adds up over time. Potential snaps under load can cause complete loss of power or crashes when the chain lets go suddenly at speed. Experienced riders view the drivetrain as critical and schedule cleaning and lubing every 500 to 1,000 miles like clockwork. Use dedicated chain cleaner, kerosene-based works well, and a brush to remove all the grit thoroughly before you even think about lubing. Apply proper chain wax or lube evenly while rotating the wheel slowly so it gets into every link. Let it set before riding so it penetrates properly instead of just sitting on the surface waiting to fling off onto your rear wheel and everywhere else. 7th, you misunderstand or avoid trail braking in corners. You either think braking and turning can't mix, like they're oil and water that will explode if combined, or you vaguely mumble about trail braking without actually applying it correctly when you ride. Often you confuse it with panic grabs mid-turn that upset the bike and make everything worse. True trail braking involves gradually releasing front brake pressure as you enter the curve, maintaining fork compression for better front tire grip, and the ability to adjust your line if something goes wrong. Early braking leads to coasting instability, causing the bike to want to stand up if you enter too hot, or wide exits that push you into oncoming traffic or off the road entirely. This contributes to 25% of cornering accidents. Without trail braking, surprises like decreasing radius corners or debris in your line become deadly scrambles where you have zero options except hoping physics works in your favor. Many licensing courses warn riders not to brake in turns to avoid lockups, but this oversimplifies the technique and leaves beginners completely unprepared for real-world riding. Experienced riders use trail braking daily on streets for control and the ability to adjust their line mid-corner. Start in an empty lot with cones marking a 90-degree turn and practice braking straight, then trailing off pressure from 50% to 0 over 2 to 3 seconds as you lean into the turn. Feel how the front end loads and settles the chassis. Progress to actual roads by entering corners at 80% of your target speed and using trail braking to tighten your line if needed. Number 8. You haven't practiced emergency braking, ever. Since you aced that parking lot stop during your test and got your license, you've never revisited full-force braking at real speeds, assuming your reflexes will magically kick in during crises without any practice to back them up. This perishable skill erodes without regular repetitions, leading to delayed reactions or improper modulation when it matters most, and you're staring down a car that just cut you off. In panic scenarios, like a vehicle pulling out in front of you at 60 miles per hour, unpracticed riders lock wheels or underbrake significantly, increasing stopping distances by 20 to 50 feet, and crash severity. Reports shows 29% of fatal motorcycle crashes involve inadequate braking when riders can't execute the technique properly under pressure. ABS helps if your bike has it, but proper technique maximizes the system and keeps you in control instead of just hoping the electronics save you. Veterans schedule monthly emergency braking drills because they know you fall to your level of training. Novices hope for the best and assume muscle memory will save them, completely ignoring how adrenaline overrides any ungrooved patterns. Find a straight, empty road where you won't get arrested, and from 40 miles per hour, progressively squeeze the front brake at 70% effort while pressing the rear at 30% simultaneously. Keep your eyes up and body weight forward to avoid doing an endo over the handlebars. Measure your stopping distances with markers or cones, aiming for under 120 feet on dry pavement as your baseline. Repeat this 10 times per session, monthly at minimum, to keep the skill sharp. Next, you ride with factory suspension settings and ignore adjustments. Your bike feels bouncy on bumps, dives excessively under brakes, or pogo sticks out of corners, but you shrug it off as normal without tweaking preload, compression, or rebound. You've never measured sag or consulted the manual for your weight and riding style. Poor setup reduces tire contact with the road, leading to traction loss in turns or unstable braking that makes every stop feel uncertain. For taller or shorter riders, it makes reach issues worse, causing fatigue on longer rides or embarrassing drops in parking lots when you can't get your feet down properly. Dealership settings suit average riders around 150 to 180 pounds, riding solo with no gear. Experts customize because they've felt the transformation after proper setup, sharper steering, and better feedback through every input you make. Beginners adapt to poor handling and convince themselves it's just how the bike rides or part of the model's character. With you aboard in riding position, measure fork and rear travel, aiming for 25 to 30% compression under your weight as a starting point. Adjust preload clicks according to your manual and test ride, noting the changes in how the bike responds. Softer feels plusher over bumps, but can get wallowy in corners. Firmer tightens things up for sport riding, but transmits more harshness to your hands. Tweak damping one click at a time and ride 10 miles to properly assess the difference before making more changes. Use a zip tie on your forks to visualize how much travel you're actually using during normal rides and aggressive cornering sessions. At number 10, you struggle with low-speed maneuvers and instability. When U-turns feel wide and wobbly, you're constantly dabbing your feet in parking lots like you're testing the temperature of bathwater, or the bike tips at stops because you can't hold it steady. This often comes from mismatched clutch feathering, no rear brake drag, or erratic throttle control that makes the bike lurch when you need it smooth. You avoid tight spaces like crowded parking or slow traffic filters because low-speed balance feels impossible and you don't want an audience for the inevitable tip-over. Low-speed drops lead to crushed ankles, bent levers, and the kind of embarrassment that makes you avoid bike nights for a month. In traffic, instability causes lane drifts into cars during filtering or wobbles that make drivers nervous about giving you space. High-speed stability is mostly the bike doing the work with gyroscopic forces, but low speed demands constant rider input and coordination. Experienced riders friction zone the clutch seamlessly, while beginners grip the bars tense, overcorrecting every tiny movement without any practice to smooth it out. Set up cones for figure eights about 8 to 10 feet in diameter, and feather the clutch in the friction zone with partial engagement. Add a hair of rear brake for drag to keep the bike stable underneath you. Maintain steady throttle around 1,000 to 2,000 RPM without rolling off or on abruptly, and keep your feet up the entire time no matter how sketchy it feels. Build up to 20 repetitions without putting a foot down or knocking over a cone. Add head turns by looking over your shoulder during U-turns to practice the weight shifts that happen in real riding situations. 11th, you fall victim to target fixation and hazards. When you spot a pothole, patch of gravel, or oncoming vehicle that's drifting into your lane, your eyes lock on it, and you steer straight toward the threat, instead of scanning for escape paths around it. This instinctive survival narrowing overrides better judgment and turns minor hazards into crashes that didn't need to happen. Fixation causes riders to drift into curbs or traffic, amplifying what should have been avoidable obstacles into actual wrecks that total bikes. It gets worse in groups where you're trying to keep up, or when you're fatigued, and your brain defaults to primitive responses instead of trained ones. Experienced riders train themselves to look through turns and past obstacles, letting their peripheral vision track the hazard, while their focus stays on the path forward and the solution. Beginners react primitively without the drills to rewire those vision habits that evolution gave us for different situations. On safe roads with no traffic around, place harmless targets like leaves or chalk marks and practice looking away from them deliberately. Say out loud where you're going, like path right or around left, while steering around the obstacle without staring directly at it. Set up cones at 20 miles per hour and force yourself to turn your head first before your body follows, weaving through without fixating on any single cone as you pass. Incorporate this into every ride by narrating threats and paths every minute or so, calling out what you see and where you're planning to go. Use commentary driving to keep your brain actively scanning the environment instead of passively reacting to whatever pops up in front of you at the last second. Number 12, you blame the bike. Complaints like, it's too top-heavy, throttle's too jerky, or just doesn't corner well dominate your conversations without considering your technique, setup, or basic maintenance. You spend time on forums ranting about the bike's flaws or browsing classifieds for something better instead of honestly assessing what you're doing wrong on the one you have. This mindset stalls growth completely and leads to persistent errors like poor body position causing twitchiness or neglected tires mimicking suspension problems. These unaddressed flaws escalate into avoidable crashes when the real issue was never the machine. Experienced riders adapt to any bike's quirks through small tweaks and better skills developed over time. Beginners externalize everything, missing that most bike problems are actually rider problems wearing a disguise. Start logging issues in a ride journal with specific details about speed, what input you made, and what happened as a result. Test potential fixes like smoother wrist movement for throttle response, or shifting your weight differently for low-speed stability issues. Swap bikes with a friend who rides the same model and see if they experience the same issues you've been complaining about for months. If they handle it fine and you don't, the bike isn't your problem. Record your rides with a camera and watch them back to catch what you're actually doing versus what you think you're doing in the moment. Attend track days to see how the bike performs when setup is dialed in and you're pushing it in a controlled environment. Shift your mindset from "what's wrong with this bike" to "what can I change about my riding?" and watch how fast you improve when you stop making excuses and start fixing yourself. So, how many of these applied to you? If it was more than half, don't feel bad. Everyone starts somewhere, and recognizing what you need to fix is the first step. The difference between riders who plateau and riders who progress is simple. One group makes excuses, the other group puts in the work. What's more important is you survive a horrible moment that you could encounter out the road, and while thinking of it, you might be wondering of the toughest bikes you could have bought. If you want to know what's out there, check out our video with world's toughest motorcycles in the world. It's a solid must-watch. Follow for more, and we'll see you on the next one.